2 weeks later, there was the headline. So for the next period of time, whatever else we were doing, she would say, those guys want to talk to you again. And I'm giving the permission to ask all these questions, and they're giving me all these answers, and I'm asking all the questions about my book. There's the book, The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, which is available now everywhere. And they're giving me the same answers as I wrote in the book. The thing I said was like science fiction. And so I was thinking, maybe I've got it right. Maybe, because I don't know if we have time to cover it in detail, but the things that are happening on our planet now are really extraordinary, and that it's really important, and I'll say it's really helpful if people understood what was happening from a celestial perspective, because it would cause you to live your life differently. You see, there's either two choices. Either we're a bunch of flesh and bones, and when we die, we don't exist anymore. And a lot of people think that. And if that was the case, then the thing to do in life is to go have fun, make a lot of love, make money, don't care about anybody else, because who cares? When I'm gone, and, leave. Now, the other possibility is that when you die, you still continue, and that the things you did in your life are going to make a difference on what happens to you when you continue. And if you believe in reincarnation, which I certainly do by now, what happens to your future lives? So if what you do in your life actually makes a difference, then it's kind of important to know it. And I believe the guys talking in this book are the guys that are on the other side that are trying to give us guidance as to make sure we have the information so that we can live our life to make sure we have the best future. Okay? Well, I think the first thing to do in this conversation with your audience is to make an attempt at proving to those people that are watching that when they die, they continue. Now, that's not an easy thing to prove. I mean, there's been people that have written books about this throughout history. And I'm going to make some attempt at how it was proven to me. And it's very compelling, because I have people that have read my book and connected with me that have said, when I used to be an atheist, and I'm not an atheist anymore, because there's a huge amount of evidence in the course of this, and it's important to give some of the evidence. And to start off with, is reincarnation real? How do we know it's real? We don't. Except, I'll show you the story. I'll tell you a bit of the story, what happened to David Wilcock, who was the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And those of you that don't know who Edgar Cayce is, please do a Google search on Edgar Cayce, because you'll see a million websites. He has got 500 books written about him. He died in 1945. He is the most famous prophet, psychic in the history of the world. He demonstrated abilities that if you read his abilities, just reading that he existed and what he did is almost proof enough that life continues. He could diagnose someone's illness just knowing their name and their city. He could recommend an alternative cure just knowing the person's name and city. He saved all these people's lives. And people would go to the doctor and they'd find out that whatever he said was wrong with them was what was wrong. And he could use medical terms, he could use medical diagnosis.
He was not even a medical.
And he was not a medical, and he never remembered what he said. He would go into a trance.
Exactly, I want to mention that he was absolutely not.
So, here is this young man by the name of David Wilcock, who's living in New Paltz, New York in 1996, and he reads a book on dreams, and he decides he's going to write his dreams down. So he puts a pad by his bed, and in the morning when he woke up, he looks at the pad, and there's messages, like somebody's talking to him. And he thinks he's making it up. But every night, he writes more messages down. After a week, the messages start to predict things in his future. very specifically, and the things start to happen. So now he knows he's not making it up. So for the next year, he's hanging tape recorders, microphones, and, you know, he's not telling.
To have the evidence.
but he's not telling anybody. He doesn't. He was just graduating college, and he thought of himself as an intellect. And he doesn't want to know people. He's got all these wacko messages coming, but he was fascinated for himself. You would do the same thing. You're going to see your patients and say, "Let me tell you what they told me last night." Well, he called it his dream voice, and his dream voice, after a year, asked him to move to Virginia Beach, which is where the Edgar Cayce Foundation was. When he moved to Virginia Beach, people started staring at him.
He looked like him,
because
I guess.
David was the spitting image of a young Edgar Cayce.
He's getting shivers. On my own entire body, just seeing that.
Now,
it goes up and down, it shivers in me. Oh my
apparently,
gosh.
The way it works is that when you die, your soul continues, and your soul memorizes your DNA. So when the soul comes into the new body, it has the DNA of the old body.
Because we were running out of time. So we've already seen now that you have DNA that has been created out of the ether. Same species at both poles. You've seen the little guys that grow in the test tube from nothing more than distilled water and sterilized sand, and there's this little scum that grows on top, and you look at it under a microscope, and boom, here's these little critters. What about DNA changing from one form to another? What about transforming DNA from one form to another so that you have the given genetic material of one species and it transforms into something else? Well, Conchazin is the guy here. And so what he does in this anatomically correct diagram is he's got your duck over here. You can see the feathers and the head. Oh, there he is. And over here you have a perfectly described chicken. Obviously, I'm being facetious. And what you have here is these little funnels that are built into the side of a little pentagonal box, and he zaps this little duck with microwaves, and all the microwaves go through these copper pipes from one room to another. If you talk in here, you'll hear it in here. It's air that can pass through. He's zapping it with microwaves, which are not going to kill the duck. It just kind of zaps his energy field enough to make it resonate, make the DNA resonate. And over here you have a chicken that has eggs in its womb. So now I want you to look at the physiology of a duck. Notice the long beak, the webbed feet, the longer neck, the larger internal cavity of organs. Whereas a chicken, by comparison, this is not what they looked like when they came out, by the way. That's just to fool you. I actually found this when I was looking for the picture of the chicken with the webbed feet, and then I found him with ducks, or her with ducks, and I'm like, wow, isn't that a synchronicity? So anyway, look, shorter beak. No webbing between the toes. This is what actually hatched. These are called duck hens. You see webbing between the toes. You see this strange-looking head. We can get a better look at it here. The eye's position is different. You get the duck-shaped head, the longer beak, the webbing between the toes. Now here's the stats. He zapped a total of 500 eggs, 480 of them hatched. 80% had a flat duck-shaped head like you just saw. 90% had the shift in the position of the eyes. 90%. And 25% had webbing appear between the toes. This is a Chinese scientist who did this. It's an amazing piece of research. You go